Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Ellen Johnson. Ellen is a second-year student in our Executive MBA class of 2026, and she's also the VP of Communications for the Executive MBA Student Association, or ESA as it's known here at Darden. I recently connected with Ellen to talk more about her background, her decision to pursue an MBA, what led her to Darden, her role as VP of Communications in a publication she worked on called The Executive Edit, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. Remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Ellen Johnson. Ellen, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. How are you doing? How's everything?
I am doing really well. If you can believe it or not, last night was my very last class of the EMBA program. So I can describe myself as being pretty reflective right now, just looking forward to LR2 and then graduation next month.
Yeah, you'll have some coursework along LR2, but I get it. You were in quarter 10. What was the last class that you had?
Yeah, I took financial institutions and markets, and then corporate strategic leadership was my last class.
Okay. Do you remember what did you talk about last night? I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, there were two consultants from McKinsey that taught the class. And so we learned a lot about frameworks and how to develop strategies, how to present strategies, really how to distill ideas to leaders and CEOs and be influential in the room. And so it was a recap of the course and just a reminder of all of the key takeaways.
Wow, what a cool class.
Yeah.
That's
It was
awesome.
really great.
Yeah, we get asked all the time about, folks have a chance to engage with actual practitioners, and there's all kinds of different ways that happens in the program, but sometimes they're actually the people teaching your class too.
There sure are. Yes.
Well, it's great to see you, and congratulations to you and your classmates. The end is near, so to speak. Graduation in May will be here before you know it. I'm looking forward to that week in Charlottesville. LR2 is always a good time.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you too, Brett.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you? What's your background?
Yeah, well, I'm Ellen Johnson. I currently serve as a Senior Director of Co-Brand Product Strategy and Performance at Hilton, which is a bit of a mouthful, but I lead our credit card program at Hilton Hotels in partnership with American Express. And my background is predominantly in the marketing field. I have been in this industry for over 20 years now and gotten the chance to work with some really cool brands over the years. I've worked with Chick-fil-A, Pfizer, ExxonMobil, Capital One, and most recently Hilton. And the way that I describe what I do is create go-to-market strategies for products and services, specifically around customer engagement and loyalty. And so my passion really lies in creating things that people love and use and want to tell their friends and family about.
How do you think you got into this customer loyalty space and thinking about that? Does it make sense in light of your life and background?
It happened a little bit by accident. When I was working at a marketing agency, my client was Pfizer, and we had an entire body of work around retention strategies. And the idea here is if you're taking a medicine and you don't actually take the medicine, you don't feel good and your ailment never goes away. And so there was a big body of work, less about the acquisition piece of getting a patient on a medicine, but more of keeping them on the medicine so that they could have positive outcomes. And it really just dawned on me that if you look at a marketing funnel and you only focus on acquiring customers, but they fall out of the funnel and they quit your product and they stop taking it, you have an acquisition problem and you are on an endless loop of trying to get more customers. And so it was really provocative to me as a marketer to start thinking of the other end of the funnel, which we call the bow tie. So if you flip the funnel, it becomes this cute little double triangle thing. But it is all about onboarding customers in the right way. It is about engaging them over time and ultimately creating enduring loyalty and advocacy so that your acquisition costs become free. They just tell friends and family, and they then create evangelists from there. And so it really just lit a fire under me. I thought it was really cool. And for the past 10 or so years, my career has really been focused on the customer side of that equation.
That's super interesting. When did you start thinking about an MBA?
Yeah. Well, I'm a lifelong learner. I love school. I love being a student. My little sisters can attest when we were younger, I loved being teacher and they were the students. And, they will probably have funny stories about how bossy I am. But I have always thought about school, and an MBA has always kind of been out there. In 2015, I became a mother. And so, of course, an MBA starts being on the back burner as I'm raising babies, and I returned to work and I was really focused on not getting mommy tracked. And in 2023, it kind of dawned on me that the way in which I was going about my career and advancement, which was hard work and grit and hand raising and going the extra mile, had kind of plateaued over time. And I had this realization that I needed new skills. I needed new knowledge to really catapult myself to the next level and really accelerate my career. And so that Christmas, I remember sitting down on the couch with my husband, and we were just talking about work and life and stuff. And he just looked at me and he goes, "Why don't you just go ahead and get your MBA?" And I said, "I can't do that." And he goes, "Yeah, of course you can." And so truly, if it was not for my husband's support and encouragement, I would not have started on this journey.
Wow, I love that. I mean, we always tell folks this takes people at home, people at work, all facets of your life to make this possible. But I love that the conversation about an MBA started with your husband. What got you interested in pursuing your MBA at Darden specifically?
Yeah. Well, Darden was at the top of my very short list of universities that I was looking at. I had some criteria in mind as I started to take a look. I knew I wanted an executive format. I was interested in universities that had more of a general management type of focus. And I also knew that I wanted an in-person experience. You can imagine 2023, COVID was still a little bit in the rearview mirror. And so I had Zoom fatigue and really was craving that in-person experience. And I also wanted to build my DC network. And so having something geographically close to where I live and where we've put down roots was really important. I'm a Floridian by birth and by the grace of God. I love my home state, but my network, from undergrad really didn't translate up into this area. And so it was really important for me in this phase of my career to be able to call on friends and classmates and colleagues to say, "Hey, like you and me went to the same school. Like, hey, can I call in a favor?" And so as I started to look around, Darden just became very clear to be the choice. And Brett, you and I had conversations throughout my admissions process, and I got a chance to come to Sands Family Grounds and visit a classroom. And it became readily apparent that I would just be very much at home at Darden, culturally, academically, and then geographically.
So I'm curious. All right, so you obviously thought about an MBA for a while. You decided to take the plunge, come to Darden. What was the adjustment like as a brand new MBA student?
It was hard. I think that you'd be hard pressed to hear anyone say otherwise, but I was prepared for the adjustment. I was prepared for it to be hard. I think I was surprised in ways that I thought were going to be hard were actually easy. And where I thought it was going to be easy, sometimes it surprised me in that they were going to be hard. The classroom environment is an adjustment, hard stop. Darden is a rigorous program. I think when you go to get your MBA, you are prepared for academic rigor and the learning curve of becoming a student again. But for me as a mom, I have a 9-year-old and 11-year-old at home. And when I started the program, they were 7 and 9. And that was the biggest hurdle for me, or adjustment, was the logistics of it all. I would start my week planning on a Saturday or Sunday and say, "Okay, I've got class this week. Well, we also have soccer practice and softball practice, and we have an event at the school, and you've got homework and I've got homework." And so I would say, "Okay, I got to do grocery shopping. Do you have uniforms? Let me go ahead and do laundry. What are we having for dinner? When are we having dinner? Do I need a carpool? If so, who is doing the carpool? And oh, by the way, have I read the case? Have I met with my learning team? Am I prepared for class?" And so that was actually the hardest part for me. But I have an awesome village. I mean, my husband has just been my rock through all of it. He has picked up 100% of the load while I've been at school. And so during the school week, when I have virtual class, he's there. During on-grounds residencies, he's, Mr. Mom Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and picking up all the work and all of the, family life and the, work that we have there. But my parents are local, and so they pitch in. I have an awesome network of other mom friends, and they help with carpools and school activities and different things. And so that's been such a big help.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear about all the support. I mean, it is important when we talk with people about the program. It's worth having the conversation early and often with your support networks at work, at home, about what the commitment is going to be. As a prospective student, someone coming into the experience, it's more speculative, right? You think it's going to be X, but then obviously you get into it. And let's say from the admission standpoint, one of the hardest things to do is to prepare people for exactly what the program is going to look like in their life. Everybody's situation is different. Everybody's commitments are different. And so filtering school and layering all this in, it can take a little while to get adjusted.
Absolutely. And also every quarter ebbs and flows. It is not the same hardness for 21 months straight. And so there might be quarters that are academically more challenging for you, but life is easier, or you're taking, classes in topics that speak to your strengths or your industry and profession. And so it's easier for you. At the same time, the season that you are in your personal life might be hard or easy. And so the thing that I tell everyone is take stock in what you need with every new quarter, because it's going to be different. Your expectations are going to be different. Your needs are going to be different. Those of your family members and your friends are going to be different. And so, that's what your learning team is for. We had, 2 strong quants in my learning team. We've got other like qualitative, strong folks as well. And so you lean on those people to say, hey, this is going to be a challenging one for me. Can you be my study buddy? Or, hey, I've got notes. Let me go ahead and share those things.
Yeah, it takes other people, right? It's a collaborative learning experience here at Darden. And I think oftentimes people who look at this program may feel, gosh, I don't have background in this area or that area. And most of our students do not have background in a lot of the core business concepts that they're encountering here. But the idea is that you have resources immediately around you, right? The learning team in your class, you have faculty who are willing to help out. You have a lot of resources you can leverage as you go through the academic part of this experience.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point, right? That's why we're in school. If we walked in as well-rounded people, we wouldn't need the MBA. But, I, sought out an MBA because I wanted more of that quantitative experience and knowledge that I felt like I didn't have walking in. And now I feel much more prepared and educated in that regard. And I think some folks were opposite. And so that's been really fun too, is you're a resource to some, and then you use others as resources as you need them.
Had you learned through the case method before you came to Darden? Was that a new learning approach?
In 2019, I got the opportunity to go down to Charlottesville for an executive education program through Capital One, and was at Darden for 7 days. And it was a bunch of other marketers. We actually got to learn through the case method with some Darden professors, and I fell in love with it. And it was really a big driver to choosing Darden. I found the case method to be incredibly applicable to the real world and really mimic life in business. Because in the classroom, just like at work, you got to be prepared. You got to walk into the meeting knowing your stuff. And be prepared to answer the question. Be prepared to be cold called by the leader or the faculty member. You should look to others to form a well-educated opinion and a recommendation. And so I thought, throughout the course of the program, that the case method actually made me stronger at work, because I was able to apply some of those principles in the preparation that I was making in the classroom and bring those good habits into my day-to-day.
Love that. So the case method itself, obviously not so new to you, but would the stakes feel different doing it as a part of an MBA program versus, say, executive education?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the executive education week that we were down at Darden was a little bit like summer camp. I had been selected as one of 40 marketers that got the opportunity to go down there. And then, that was free as, an associate at Capital One. And of course, so the stakes are higher because my money is against this one this time around. But also you are doing it for 21 months straight. And so you don't have the chance to say, hey, after 7 days, I'm mentally exhausted. I'm glad that's done, but I learned a lot. It's like, hey, I'm mentally exhausted and I have class tomorrow and I'm preparing for 3 days of on grounds residencies with 8 hours back to back in the classroom. And so there's a mental fatigue that goes to it. But I think, again, that really sharpens you and gives you that corporate athleticism and agility when you bring it back into your office.
I love that idea of corporate athleticism. I never really thought about that, but you're going through a sort of training experience, right? You're conditioning yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, how do you manage your energy? You're talking about the things that, obviously demand your time and attention and energy, right? Distance classes and prep for a weekend residency. Of course, the weekend residency itself, it's 13 class sessions over the course of, 2.5 days. And that can feel like a lot. How do you manage your energy? How do you recharge? Because school doesn't really stop, right?
Yeah, school does not stop. I am a big, big, firm believer in 8 to 10 hours of sleep. That is one of my non negotiables. I know I've got friends and colleagues and classmates that are good on 5 to 6. That is not me. And so my sleep is really important to me. And that is where I feel recharged. I also spend quiet time with just myself in the morning. So I will wake up early to read, drink coffee, I pray, I'll work out. And that is just my 1 hour of my own time that fills my cup and sets me up for success at the beginning of every single day. The weeks ahead of OGRs look a little different because, of course, we don't have class, but there's a lot of preparation. And so I will use that time to be completely prepared heading into OGRs so that my focus once I'm on grounds is only learning and only socializing and kind of the fun of it. Some of my classmates actually use on grounds to study in the seams. And so, after a full day of class, they might go back to the hotel and they'll study for the next day. And that to me feels harder. I'm a big preparation and ounce of prevention is a pound of cure kind of gal. And so I always make sure that I'm pretty buttoned up ahead of time so that I've got margin and I've got room to breathe and take on anything that might come at me that was unexpected.
Well, your advice certainly aligns with my advice. I always tell people you want to have your work done before you come to the weekend residency so you can really enjoy the residency rather than scrambling around, feeling like you got to go back to your hotel room, try to read 4 or 5 cases before the next day. That's no
Oh,
way to live. I don't
no,
think.
no, you're mentally depleted and you miss out on the fun. I think when you're a prospective student, you're thinking about the learning in the classroom, but so much of the experience of Darden actually happens outside of that. And that's where the magic happens, I think.
Yeah, and I think you have to see the value of the MBA as something broader than just the class experience. I mean, that certainly is a big part of it, but there's other things too. And you want to create space so you can be fully present for those experiences. And certainly doing your homework well ahead of time allows you to do things like Friday Night Live and go out to eat dinner with your classmates or do some of the social activities on Saturdays or maybe even catch up with your classmates after class on Sunday, which some people will do if they're traveling or they have a little bit of a commute. Um, so so, Ellen, I'm curious, how have your career goals evolved, or have they evolved during your time here at Darden?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say not so much my career goals and ambitions, but more so about how I approach my career, I think has evolved during my time at Darden. When I reflect when I started at Darden, and I hope this is not unique, I was really selfish and self-serving. I went into it thinking, okay, what is in it for me? How am I going to get myself promoted? How am I going to advance my career? And, the Darden faculty and career team and program team are just so wonderful. And I have to just, shout out and give praise. Sean Martin, Greg French, Mark House. I mean, they are just my people. And they were so instrumental in my journey to help me rethink and reframe my leadership approach and really equip me to think about my life as a leader after I leave Darden. And so through classes and coaching and just casual conversation, I'm now approaching my career much more through a servant leadership type of mindset. And so the things that I think about are, how might I leave this a little bit better than how I found it? How can I leverage my unique gifts to serve others and to drive change? how might I tap into other people's strengths to give them purpose and confidence in what they do? And so I think Darden is really unique in that sense that the faculty impart this responsibility on us. You are in a very rare and elite group of people that have the privilege of getting an executive education. We are a very small group of people when you think about it. And so when you leave Darden, you've got this responsibility to do good and to share your strengths and your gifts and your knowledge with others. And what a privilege to do that. But I think I credit the faculty for not just teaching us, but also teaching us that hey, what you have now is really special, and go forth and share that, spread the goodness.
Yeah, I love that idea. Now, you changed jobs during the program.
I did.
What was that like?
Yeah. Some people thought it was a little crazy. I was at Capital One and through the first 8 months of the program, and then transitioned over to Hilton 8 months in. And so I just actually finished 1 year at Hilton. And so it just goes to show you how much life happens and how quickly things happen while you're in the program. But it was a more seamless transition than I expected, but it was what I hoped for. I was able to transfer a lot of the skills that I had at Capital One, obviously it being financial services and credit card focused. That is my role at Hilton. Even though I'm in a hospitality industry now, I am still, I tell my kids, mommy sells credit cards. So that is still what I do for a living. And so that piece was very much the same. I'm obviously learning a new corporate culture and a new industry that is, hospitality, and what we sell is heads and beds is what we say. But I had a great network and a great support group throughout it all. And so my new boss has been absolutely phenomenal and so supportive in helping me continue my Darden journey uninterrupted. And the program team and the career team have just been phenomenal in helping support me through this as well. And so I tell anyone that asks, use them. They are such a resource and they are at your disposal. But I used the career team, as I was thinking about a transition. I used them during my interview process, and I continue to use them afterwards. I just had my annual review, and I brought it to the career team, and I said, hey, here are my strengths. Here's my feedback. What do we think about that? Let's create an action plan. And so Darden gave me the resources to make sure that this was kind of a non-event, except that it was a promotion and, a change in my career through it all.
That's a great story. I always tell folks it can be a little tricky sometimes to change jobs during the program, because you go to a new organization and you're having to sort of establish your brand at that organization. Who are you? What's your work style? You're meeting a whole new group of people and you're having to get established at that company. But it's great to have a supportive boss. And I imagine the fact that you were doing it at Darden MBA was maybe something that was interesting to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I told him. I go, hey, listen, I've made this commitment. It's 21 months. You're going to get a really hard worker out of me. I am wholly committed to anything that I do. And by the way, at the end of this thing, you're going to get a Darden educated employee that gets to bring all this goodness back to your company and make an impact. And so I think that was a pretty easy sell.
That's great. Well, Ellen, obviously you had a full plate while you're going through the program. We talked about the family and personal commitments, but you've also decided to take on some leadership roles. So how have you been engaged extracurricularly? Anything outside the classroom you'd want to mention here?
Yeah. So I served as the VP of communications on the ESA board. ESA is Executive Student Association. And the way that I describe it to my friends is it's basically student council for adults. And so we have a president, we have an executive vice president, and then we have a bunch of VPs that serve a variety of roles like communications, academics, career, clubs, wellness, social. And so it's a group of about 10 student leaders that serve the cohort and lead various functions.
Well, let's talk about being VP of communications, because every ESA board does something a little bit different. Your board decided to do something called the executive edit. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, as VP of communications, my role is to ensure that the cohort has information, and I am the curator of the information and the distiller of that thing. And so when I was transitioning into this role, my predecessor gave me a lot of very practical tips and tricks on how to do that thing, but he wasn't specific on what I should tell the cohort. And given the fact that the ESA board as a function is relatively new, I believe it started at Darden only about 5 years ago, I felt like that gave me permission to develop my own communication strategy that really fit the needs of the cohort. And so as I was reflecting on, okay, what am I going to do? What is my approach to communications? I remembered my father-in-law, who had this amazing career in the newspaper industry. And he was part of the USA Today launch team back in the 80s. He worked for the LA Times. He worked for the San Francisco Chronicle. And at the end of his career, he was a publisher of a newspaper in a small market in Ohio. And I remember being home one holiday and we were drinking wine and he was regaling us with all these great stories. And I remember he said, anyone can get their news from the AP and they can get their Associated Press news from any source. But what they really want is to see their name in print. What they really want is to know what their neighbors are up to. They really want to hear about what their friends are doing. And that just kind of stuck with me. And it sparked this idea of understanding that our EMBA cohort can actually get Darden news from a variety of different sources. Darden is really great in communicating what's going on at the school and also more broadly across the UVA community. But what they really want to know is what their classmates are up to. And so with that inspiration, the executive edit was born. And I endeavored to put all 120 of my classmates in with their names in print over the next 13 months that I was VP of Communications, and was really thrilled that I was able to do that.
So you got everybody in there?
Everyone got in there. We've had some attrition in the cohort. So I think that there ended up being 113 of us at the very end of it. But every single one of my classmates got mentioned in the executive edit.
Wow, that's so cool. What's it been like? I mean, obviously a real labor of love, but what's it been like to work on this publication?
Yeah, it's been such a gift. I mean, it's given me, I think, more than I've given it, that whole adage. But I loved the humanness of it all. And I wasn't expecting that as I came in. I really thought it was going to be a little bit more transactional. But I was recently introduced to this concept of Sonder, which is the realization that everyone you meet, the barista, the coworker, the classmate, is living this beautiful, complex, and complicated life outside of this fleeting interaction that you get with them. And in the program, you make all of these deep friendships, but you can't befriend all 120 some odd people. And so you get fleeting interactions with many of your classmates, if not most of your classmates. And so I loved the fact that in addition to our intense Darden learning and getting new jobs and earning promotions, that people were getting engaged and married and having babies and writing books and training for marathons and all these wonderful things. And so the executive edit actually gave me an avenue to share in my classmates' lives and tell their story. And over the course of 13 issues, it really just became this collection of our collective story that I had the privilege of telling. And that was just such a gift.
Do you have any favorite stories you
My goodness.
featured?
I have so many favorites. Every month there were specific features that I would do over and over. And one of them was the Global Residency Report. And so this was a travelogue that folks that came back from their global residencies would talk about. And so I went to Germany. And so of course I know what Germany was like, but I had no idea what it was like in Vietnam or Argentina or Finland. And I expected most had similar curiosity. And so I would have students write about their experiences in country. They would talk about the businesses they visited, the industry, their overall thoughts and reactions about, traveling to a foreign country. But also they would tell stories about what they would do after hours and all of the fun that was had with their classmates. And so those were a lot of fun. But I would say as the executive edit matured and evolved, I started creating a special rotating feature that was seasonal. And so with this, classmates would submit photos with captions. And that one was pretty dear to me because it was so personal. And so I got to share summer vacations. In November, for example, we did a salute to our veterans. We did a prom recap. And then most recently, I did a 2-part series recapping our favorite Darden memories over the past 21 months.
Yeah, I was curious how you come up with the sections because I read it every time it comes out, and I'm always
Yeah.
curious to see what people are up to. But how did you figure out what the various columns would be or the different topics that you wanted to cover?
Yeah. I solicited a lot of ideas from the board. And so they would help me. We did a feature when we started electives. Everyone had FOMO because it was the first time that we weren't all together in core classes together. And so you were like, well, what's that class about? And so instead of wondering, I did a whole feature on electives and had folks tell a little bit about what they were learning and why they thought it was cool. Sometimes it was things that I personally did. So like I went on vacation and I thought, I wonder if other people went on vacation. And so we did the vacation feature and people submitted pictures from Egypt and Italy and Florida and, all over. And that was also very cool.
Yeah, I love when we talk to prospective students, people are like, I don't have any other time. If I do this, I can't do anything else. I'm not going to change jobs. I'm not going to move. We're not going to have any children. It's just all school. That's what I can do. And then you give it like a year, you run into that same person and say, "Hey, how's everything going?" They've moved to a new house. They maybe got a new job. Their husband, or whatever, wife. I mean, they're adding to their family. They also have been on another global residency. It's amazing. I don't. How do you explain that? Like people get into the program and they somehow find that they have more time than they think they have. I
You,
don't.
yeah, I mean, you make room for life. Life happens. This program is 21 months. And so I think that we are foolish in thinking that we're going to press pause and we're just going to focus on this one thing and everyone else is going to just wait for us. And I'm glad that that's not the case. I think as a prospective student, we just don't know what it's going to be. And so therefore there is this fear and trepidation of saying, I'm going to not do anything else because this is going to be so disruptive to my life. But, that's not true at all. And so I go back to this idea of Sonder that we're all living these beautiful, complex and exciting lives. And thank goodness, I think that that's the spice of life. And that's what's so cool about it. And again, you get used to anything once you've been in the program and you've got the cadence of it all under your belt. You look at the calendar and you say, oh, hey, listen, this group is going on a global residency, but I'm staying put. What am I going to do for these 2 weeks that I have off? And so you use those breaks to your advantage to, make time and make room for things that otherwise might be on hold during the heavy seasons of school.
Yeah, I love that point about you really don't know what it's going to be like in the program.
Mhm.
I do, though, find that people, their life orients or reorients around the program, right? So, you figure out, what's really important, what's less important. Those less important things maybe get pushed to the side a little bit. You really figure out those non negotiables where you want to push your time and energy. And you find you have a little bit more time than you expected because you've dialed back in some areas. I think that's, at least my experience, is pretty typical for students.
Yeah, I would agree. And, like I mentioned, I have two kids, and last night was my last class. And I came upstairs, and my daughter had written me this handwritten book while I was in class. And it just said, congratulations, mommy. It was your last class. And each page had something about it. But she said, I was so worried you weren't going to have time for me. And I've never been prouder for you. Everyone says your MBA is so important, but you always have loved me the most. And, out of the mouth of babes, she's only 9 years old, but I just thought like, wow, that's so special. And I'm so glad that was her perspective of it because I tried really hard to make sure that they never felt that school was above them. And so you do make time for it and you make time for the things that are important to you. And for some, school is the most important thing. And I think that that's great. But I would say to prospective students, don't be nervous or fearful that those things that you hold very important in your life will be second or third. Like you can do it all. You can manage it all.
Yeah, I talking to a lot of parents as they go through the program, they oftentimes would say they got more scheduled as they went through the program. They started putting things like family time on their calendar or blocking out time to spend time with their kids. And that may sound odd, but it's to ensure that that's accounted for and it's planned for. And it doesn't get boxed out just by school or some other activities. It's equally important to the other things
Yeah.
that you have going on.
Yeah, I think you become much more intentional with your time. And, in things where you're like, well, I'll get to that. My son and I have a new routine where, we go on walks together around the neighborhood after dinner. And it's 20, 30 minutes, not a lot of time at all, but we breathe some fresh air. He and I have conversation one-on-one. And then I'm able to go back inside and, just last night, like do an hour and a half of class after that.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, what are you looking forward to in the last few weeks of school, and then maybe even beyond?
Yeah. Well, just savoring the moment. We've got LR2 coming up. And so we'll be down in Charlottesville for one more week. And then, of course, in May, we graduate. And so I'm really just stopping to savor it all and not rush through it. I think post graduation and post Darden, I'm really just looking forward to the summer months. My son's going into middle school. My daughter's going to be in fourth grade. And we're all in a season transition. And so just spending time with family is going to be really important. But I have a list of hobbies and activities that I hope that I can redirect all of my Darden time towards. So in 6 months, Brett, I might be a amateur pickleballer. I might have picked up needlepoint. I want to play piano again. I've got a stack of books. I'm going to become a baker. I got a lot of things. And so I'm excited to try them all.
It's so funny. Obviously people, when they finish the program, they're so excited, you got more downtime. But man, if people don't immediately fill up that downtime with something else and they've got all kinds of activities going on, and I think it's really kind of a reflection of what the program does in terms of people's understanding of what time is there, what time that's available to them, what they can do with that time. Like they find that they have more hours than they thought because, again, to the intentionality point, or they've just become more efficient, or they've had some experience like prioritizing things in a different kind of way. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
always amazed by that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true.
Well, Ellen, one more question for you, and we'll wrap up. Any piece of advice? Obviously, you shared a lot of advice and insights for our listeners today, but any final word of advice you would share with our listeners as they think about their own MBA journeys?
Yeah. If you are even halfway thinking about it or on the fence, make the leap and do it. It is the greatest gift that you can give yourself personally and professionally. I would say once you're in the program, be in it, be present, soak it up. It is hard, but the hard is what makes it great. I am just so grateful for the time that I've had. I think that there is just not often as an adult do you get to learn from a collection of amazing, diverse, smart people. We laugh. I think the laughter is the piece that I'm going to miss the most. I mean, we just have such a great time together. You learn from state of the art, brilliant faculty, and you get to then walk away with an education that no one can take away from you. And so it has just been such an amazing journey, and I will miss it quite a bit when this is all over in a few weeks. But I would say if you are thinking about it, go ahead and do it, and you will not regret it.
Well, Ellen, it's great to catch up with you, and thanks for all the
You too,
work you've
Brent.
done on the executive edit. It's been so much fun to see your classmates featured in such interesting ways, and hear the stories of students as it played out over the course of the program. As someone who's obviously just a staff member here, it's been great to keep up with students and what's happening in their lives through that publication. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Brett. And special thank you for your ability to curate 120 of us that made up the class of 2026. We always sing your praises and look back and we're like, man, he's good at his job. We've got a really special cohort, and we're incredibly grateful that you brought us all together. So thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, to see a class come together and see y'all enjoying each other's company and really bonding in that way. And it'll be fun to be down in Charlottesville with y'all for Leadership
Yeah,
Residency 2, or LR2 as it's known,
well, good.
that final week of school. So it'll
I'm
be
looking
great.
forward to seeing you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ellen, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brett.
And that was my conversation with Ellen Johnson, a second-year student in our Executive MBA class of 2026. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, and you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXECMBA at darden.virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.